Most people don't wear their cruelty like a mask. They wear it like a mirror, turning it on you until you start to question your own reflection. Evil doesn't always storm into your life. Sometimes it whispers, manipulates, and smiles while it breaks you. And by the time you realize what's happening, you're already bleeding emotionally, wondering how it all went so wrong with someone who seemed so right. Let's be honest, when we hear the word evil, most of us imagine something loud, obvious, and dramatic. Maybe it's a villain in a movie or someone committing violent acts that we could never imagine ourselves witnessing, let alone experiencing firsthand. But in real life, evil is rarely so dramatic. In fact, it's often subtle. It doesn't walk into the room announcing itself. It smiles, it flatters, it pretends to care. It wears the perfect mask, and here's the hard truth. Evil is not always about what someone does right away. It's about who they are consistently, especially when no one's watching. Some of the most dangerous people are not the ones who scream or lash out in anger. They're the ones who are quietly eroding someone's sense of self little by little. They know exactly how to poke at your insecurities and twist the knife while keeping their hands clean. They show up in boardrooms, family dinners, relationships, communities. They're not cartoons, they're clever, strategic, calculated, and that's what makes the first sign so important, because it's the one that reveals the heart of who they really are. Evil people derive pleasure from causing pain. Now, let me clarify. This isn't just about someone losing their temper once or saying something cruel in a heated moment. We've all done that. I have, you have. That's being human, not being evil. What I'm talking about is something much colder, much more deliberate. It's the person who enjoys seeing someone squirm, the one who smiles when you're embarrassed, the one who provokes, not to engage, but to dominate, to make you feel small, powerless, or ashamed. You see it in little moments. A jab that looks like a joke, but cuts deep. A compliment that's laced with a subtle insult. A knowing look that's meant to humiliate you in front of others, just enough that no one else even notices, but you do, you feel it, and they know you feel it. And here's where it gets even more insidious. They often hide it under the guise of humor or just being honest. They'll say, "I'm just playing," or "you're too sensitive," or "can't you take a joke?" But when pain is the punchline, it's not a joke. It's cruelty, and over time that cruelty becomes the currency of control. Because what happens when someone repeatedly makes you feel unsure of yourself? You start second, guessing your reactions. You question your memory. You tell yourself it wasn't that bad, that maybe you're being dramatic, that maybe you need to toughen up. But no, you don't need to toughen up. You need to pay attention. Because someone who finds satisfaction in your suffering, no matter how subtle, is not someone you can safely be vulnerable with. You deserve relationships where your softness isn't weaponized, where your joy isn't resented, where your wounds aren't exploited. Evil people don't just hurt others. They feed on that hurt. They may not say it out loud, but their actions tell you, "Your pain is my power," and if you confront them, they'll flip the script. Suddenly, you're the one overreacting. You're the one attacking them. They'll look calm, collected, maybe even amused, while you feel like you're unraveling. That's not an accident. That's the design, and the more emotional you get, the more they dig in, because it reinforces what they want you to believe, that you are the problem, that you are unstable, that you are too much, but you are not too much. You are not the problem. You are simply in the presence of someone who does not wish to understand you. They wish to control you. The pain they cause isn't just collateral damage. It's the point. And the longer you stay in that kind of dynamic, the more you start to lose sight of yourself. You begin to shrink, to silence yourself, to avoid setting them off. You start to walk on eggshells, and that's how evil gains ground. Not through grand, dramatic actions, but through consistent erosion. 1,000 tiny paper cuts that eventually bleed you dry. So if you've ever found yourself in a relationship or situation where someone seems to light up when you're in distress, where they're energized by your discomfort. Please don't ignore it. That is not just a red flag, that's a flashing neon sign. Because people who are capable of empathy, who are anchored in kindness, who know how to love and be loved, they don't enjoy your pain. They don't minimize your hurt. They don't smile at your fear when someone shows you again and again that your suffering doesn't move them, or worse, that it excites them. You are not safe there. You don't need more evidence. You need an exit. Pain is inevitable in life, but the people we choose to let into our hearts, they should never be the source of it. And when you find yourself trying to explain to someone why their words cut, why their actions hurt, and they look at you with amusement instead of concern, that's not a misunderstanding. That's clarity. That's the mask slipping, and that's your cue to walk away. If someone lies to protect themselves, if they bend the truth out of fear or shame, well, that's human, not admirable, but understandable. We've all done it at some point, maybe in childhood, maybe last week. But when lying becomes a strategy, a tool to manipulate, confuse, and control, that's a whole different story. That's not just dishonesty. That's a kind of betrayal that runs deeper than we often realize in the moment. Because here's the thing, people who operate from a place of true malice don't lie by accident. They don't get their facts wrong. They create narratives on purpose. They twist reality, not out of desperation, but out of design. And when someone lies without flinching, when they distort truth effortlessly and often, it's not just a character flaw. It's a warning sign. It starts slowly. Usually, you might catch them in a little inconsistency. Something doesn't quite line up. You ask a question and they hesitate, just a beat too long, or they give you an answer that doesn't make sense, but they say it with such confidence you almost feel guilty for doubting them. So you let it slide. You tell yourself it's no big deal, but that's how it works. Not with a bang, but with a whisper, one story that doesn't add up, one fact they conveniently forget, one conversation you both clearly remember, but somehow now it never happened. Or it happened differently, or you misunderstood, and suddenly you're off balance, you're unsure. You start keeping mental score, writing things down, replaying conversations in your head. Not because you're obsessive, but because something in your gut is telling you that reality is being edited around you, that the truth is no longer solid ground. That's what manipulation does. It makes you doubt yourself. It makes you feel like you're standing in quicks, and while they stand there calm and smug on solid ground, acting like you're the one who's confused, and if you question it, if you confront them, they don't apologize. They don't explain, they deflect, or worse, they lie again. It becomes a loop. You feel like you're going crazy, and they're standing there holding the match, asking why you're so dramatic about the fire. People who weaponize lies aren't just trying to protect themselves from consequences. They're using dishonesty as a tool to disarm you. It's a way to gain power, not just over what you believe, but over how you see yourself. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Not just the lies themselves, but the way they start to fracture your ability to trust your own voice. Because here's what they know, and this is important. They know that once you stop trusting yourself, they've won. That's the goal. That's why the lies aren't random. They're strategic, meant to keep you off balance, meant to erode your sense of certainty, and they're often mixed with just enough truth to keep you questioning. That's the part that really messes with your head, because when someone lies constantly, you can see it. But when they lie selectively, just enough to skew your perception, just enough to turn you around in circles, that's when the damage goes deeper. One minute they're love, bombing you, the next they're gaslighting you, then they're acting like everything is normal and you're the only one who seems to be struggling. You feel like you're being pulled in every direction and no one else sees it. Because to the outside world, they're charming, polished, kind even, but behind closed doors, they rewrite history, they minimize your concerns, they turn every confrontation into a reflection of your flaws. And slowly, you start to lose confidence in what's real. That is not a misunderstanding. That is manipulation. And the worst part, these kinds of people are often very good at playing victim when needed. If you finally reach a breaking point and try to pull away, they'll turn the tables. Suddenly, they're wounded, betrayed. How could you think that of me? I was just trying to help. They use your empathy against you. They cry. They apologize. They say all the right words, and for a moment you might believe them. But words are easy. It's the patterns that tell the truth. And when the patterns show a repeated, intentional distortion of reality, when someone continues to lie, manipulate, and twist facts in ways that serve them and confuse you, that is not someone who slipped up. That is someone who is using your trust as leverage. You deserve to feel clarity. You deserve to feel grounded in what you know to be true. And when someone is constantly pulling you away from that, when their lies make you question your memory, your perception, your sanity, that is not a relationship. That's a trap. You don't need more evidence. You don't need to catch them in a perfect lie with irrefutable proof. Your confusion, your exhaustion, your anxiety, that is the proof. People who love you don't make you feel like you have to become a detective in your own life. When truth becomes a moving target in someone's hands, your job isn't to keep chasing it. Your job is to remember what it feels like to trust yourself again. That moment of doubt you keep dismissing. It's not paranoia, it's your intuition. Listen to it. One of the most sobering realizations you'll ever come to in a relationship, whether it's romantic, professional, or even within your own family, is that someone you've trusted, shared your heart with, maybe even loved, does not feel empathy. Not just in a moment, not just because they were overwhelmed or distracted, but consistently lacks the ability or desire to connect with your pain. That's not just difficult, that's devastating, and I want to be really clear here. We all have moments when we miss the mark emotionally. We all get tired, frustrated, or self-focused. But what I'm talking about now isn't about temporary disconnection. It's not someone failing to say the right thing during a hard time. It's about the kind of person who looks at your suffering and feels nothing, or worse, feels justified, annoyed, inconvenienced, even satisfied. That's a sign you're not just dealing with someone who's wounded or guarded. You're dealing with someone whose emotional compass is fundamentally broken. Empathy is what makes us human. It's the glue that holds relationships together. When we see someone in pain, we feel it with them. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not always, but we try. That trying, that reaching, is the heartbeat of connection. But when you're with someone who lacks empathy, you feel the opposite of connection. You feel alone, silenced, invisible. You could be crying in front of them, explaining exactly what hurt you, laying it all out with vulnerability and honesty. And they'll sit there, cold, indifferent. Or they'll get defensive, roll their eyes, change the subject, or worst of all, turn the pain back on you like you're the one doing something wrong by expressing it. There's something so dehumanizing about being vulnerable with someone who has no capacity or no willingness to hold space for that. You start to wonder if you're asking for too much, being too emotional, too sensitive, too needy. But the truth is, you're not asking for too much. You're asking for something that should be foundational in any meaningful relationship: basic human compassion. And when empathy is absent, something else almost always is too: remorse. Think about that. When someone hurts you, intentionally or not, and they don't feel remorse, that tells you everything you need to know. They might say the words, "I'm sorry," but you can feel there's nothing behind them. There's no reflection, no ownership, no concern for how you're actually doing. And when there's no remorse, nothing changes. They'll keep doing the same thing in the same way over and over again, because remorse is what sparks change. It's what makes us pause and think, "I don't want to hurt this person again." If someone doesn't feel that pull to grow, to repair, to make it right, it's not just that they don't care about what happened, they don't care about you. That's a hard thing to face, especially when you've invested so much time trying to explain your pain, trying to help them understand, but you can't teach empathy to someone who doesn't want to learn it. You can't make someone care by bleeding in front of them. You can't beg someone into a conscience. And yet, so many of us stay. We tell ourselves if we could just explain it better, say it differently, be a little more patient, a little less reactive, maybe then they'll get it. Maybe then they'll see us. But let me tell you, if someone is watching you suffer and refusing to soften, that's not a communication problem. That's a character problem. And here's the thing. People who lack empathy are often incredibly good at pretending they have it when it serves them. They'll show up when there's an audience. They'll say the right thing when it benefits their image. But when the doors are closed, when it's just you and them, that mask drops. And what you're left with is a person who does not feel what you feel, and who doesn't care that they don't. That's not someone you can build a safe emotional world with. That's someone who will always make you question your right to have emotions at all. So, if you find yourself constantly defending your feelings, apologizing for your pain, or being told that your reactions are too much, please take a step back and ask yourself this. Is this person actually interested in understanding me? Or are they just waiting for me to stop talking? Because empathy isn't about agreeing with everything. It's not about fixing things. It's about showing up. It's about being present in someone's experience and letting them know they're not alone. And when someone can't or won't do that, that's not love, that's not care, that's a hollow performance of connection with nothing holding it up underneath. And eventually, that hollowness will start to echo in you. It'll feel like you're grieving someone who's still right in front of you. So don't ignore the numbness you feel when your heart is met with silence. Don't explain away the coldness in their eyes. That's not your fault. And it's not your job to fix. Empathy and remorse are not luxuries in relationships. They are necessities. Without them, there's no safety. Without them, there's no healing. And without them, all the love in the world won't be enough to hold you together. When someone consistently shows you they are unmoved by your pain, believe them. One of the most disorienting experiences you can have with someone, especially someone close to you, is when they keep turning the blame around. Every single time you try to hold them accountable, every time you express how their behavior has impacted you, suddenly you're not the one who's hurt. You're the one doing the hurting. Somehow, your pain becomes the problem. Your reaction becomes the issue, and just like that, they've flipped the script. This is one of the clearest signs that you're not dealing with someone who just struggles with communication. You're dealing with someone who is intentionally projecting. Someone who refuses to look inward and instead throws everything that's ugly or uncomfortable about themselves back at you like it was yours all along. It's a tactic, one that's subtle at first, and then, if you're not careful, becomes the normal rhythm of the relationship. It's gaslighting with a twist, not just denying what they did, but accusing you of the very things they're doing. It's maddening. You'll say, "You're not listening to me." And suddenly they're accusing you of never listening. You'll say, "You hurt me," and now you're being told you're manipulative, that you're twisting things, that they feel attacked. You begin to carry the weight of everything that goes wrong, even when you know, deep down, you didn't cause it. And over time, that confusion starts to hollow you out. You walk away from conversations feeling like the bad guy, even when you were the one who brought up your pain calmly, honestly, from a place of care. Projection is one of the most dangerous behaviors because it's not just about shifting blame, it's about warping your reality. It's about making you question who you are and what you believe about yourself. And when you hear enough of those projections, when someone keeps telling you that you're cold, selfish, dramatic, manipulative, even abusive, you start to wonder if it's true. This is how deeply evil operates. Not with physical violence or screaming matches all the time, but by slowly transferring the weight of their own behavior onto your shoulders, by pushing their shadow onto you and then standing back while you try to make sense of why it feels so heavy. You start to internalize it. You begin apologizing for things you didn't do. You feel guilt without cause. You tiptoe around conversations. You try harder to be perfect, to communicate better, to keep the peace. And still, it's never enough, because the goalposts always move, because it was never about understanding. It was about control, and the cruel part is this: they know what they're doing. They know the moment they turn your pain into a weapon against you, they've regained power. Because now you're distracted, now you're defending, now you're unraveling while they sit back and watch it happen. This is not an accident. This is emotional warfare, and sometimes they won't even do it outright. They'll plant little seeds. You always seem angry. Why do you twist things? I'm starting to worry about your mental health. Small statements that sound like concern, but are really meant to destabilize you, to shake your confidence, to chip away at your sense of self until you don't even trust your own perspective anymore. That's the goal, to wear you down, not by force, but by erosion, to make you believe that you are the problem. Because if they can convince you of that, they don't ever have to change. And what's heartbreaking is how often this happens in relationships that started with love, or at least the illusion of it. You remember the beginning, when they were kind, generous, even vulnerable, when they seemed to care, and now you're clinging to those memories like they're proof that this version, the one who blames and projects and evades, isn't who they really are. But I want to tell you something: who someone chooses to be in conflict, in accountability, in the face of their own impact. That is who they are. Because love without responsibility isn't love, and kindness that disappears when challenged isn't real kindness. When someone keeps projecting their darkness onto you, when they refuse to own even a sliver of how they've hurt you, they are showing you exactly who they are. They're telling you without apology, I will not look at myself, I will not grow, I will not take responsibility, but I will make you feel like it's all your fault. And you can't heal in that kind of dynamic. You can't grow, you can't rest, because you're constantly on edge, constantly spinning in circles trying to prove that you're not the person they've painted you to be. But the truth is, you don't have to prove your goodness to someone who's committed to seeing you through a distorted lens. You deserve relationships where accountability is shared, where people can say, you're right, I hurt you, I see that, I'm sorry, where conflict isn't turned into a courtroom where you're always on trial. Because when someone projects their evil onto you, what they're really saying is, I won't carry my own baggage, so I'll make you carry it instead. That is not love. That is not connection. That is harm. When the blame is always yours, but the power is always theirs, it's time to walk away. There's something especially cruel about the way some people exploit kindness, not just take it for granted, but twist it. Use it, target it. When you're someone who leads with compassion, who wants to believe the best in people, who gives second chances, not because you're naive, but because you value connection and hope, it can be deeply unsettling to realize someone has been taking advantage of that from the start. And they don't do it in obvious ways. That's what makes it so dangerous. They don't show up waving red flags. No, they show up interested, attentive, maybe even vulnerable. They mirror your warmth, your values, your empathy. They know how to read the room, how to say all the right things to get your guard down, not to build trust, but to gain access. Because when you're wired for connection, you're also wired to offer grace. And these people know it. They know you'll give the benefit of the doubt. They know you'll assume the best before you assume the worst. They know that even when something feels off, your first instinct will be to check yourself, not them. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe they're just having a hard time. Maybe if I just show a little more patience. And while you're doing all that inner work, while you're examining your own heart and trying to stay grounded in love and understanding, they're not doing the same. They're taking, draining, pushing the boundaries further each time just to see how far they can go. how much they can get, how much you'll tolerate, not out of desperation, but entitlement. There's a kind of person who sees kindness as weakness. Not because it is, but because they believe power is only real when it's taken from someone else. They confuse generosity with gullibility. They assume that empathy means you won't fight back, that compassion means you won't see the truth, that love means you won't leave. And if they've done this before, and they often have, they've learned exactly how to manipulate people like you, people who want to help, people who believe everyone is redeemable. People who have been taught that love is unconditional no matter how many times it's abused. But love is not a blank check for mistreatment, and kindness is not consent to be used. At some point, you begin to feel the fracture inside you. That quiet war between what you want to believe about this person and what your body already knows. You feel the exhaustion. You feel how heavy everything has become. You notice how your kindness doesn't feel like kindness anymore, it feels like currency. Like something you're constantly spending to buy peace, buy safety, buy a moment of calm. You find yourself in this cycle where the more you give, the more they take, and the less you get in return. And when you finally set a boundary, when you say, "This doesn't feel good," or "I need things to change," the mask slips. Suddenly, you're the selfish one, the cold one. "After everything I've done for you," they say, as if they haven't been feeding on your spirit the whole time. That's the trick. They make your boundaries look like betrayal. They flip the narrative so it feels like you are hurting them by trying to protect yourself, and that confusion, that guilt, it keeps you stuck. But here's the truth. People who love you don't make your compassion a liability. They don't take the most beautiful parts of you, your tenderness, your patience, your willingness to forgive, and use them as weapons against you. That's not love, that's exploitation dressed up as intimacy, and the worst part is, it can take a long time to see it, especially when you've built a story around them, especially when you've invested hope, time, your whole heart. You want so badly to believe it was real, that you weren't just a resource, that it wasn't all manipulation, but realizing you've been used doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means your heart was open, and that's something to be proud of. It means you were willing to risk vulnerability, to show up with love in a world that often encourages the opposite. That's not failure, that's courage, and sometimes courage looks like walking away. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop giving to someone who only knows how to take, not because you've stopped loving, but because you've started loving yourself too. You can still be kind. You can still be open, but you also get to be discerning. You get to say, "My empathy is not for sale." You get to protect your peace, because the kind of people who exploit goodness don't just harm you. They train you to betray yourself in the process. And reclaiming that self-trust, that's the beginning of healing. When someone repeatedly turns your kindness into a tool for control, it's not your job to be kinder. It's your job to stop giving them the weapon. There's something deeply unsettling about being around someone who thrives in chaos, especially when that chaos is subtle, strategic, and always just below the surface. At first, you might not even recognize it. It starts small, a little drama here, a misunderstanding there, a conversation that felt off, but you brushed it aside, and then slowly you begin to notice a pattern. Things are always stirred up around them, always messy, always emotionally charged, and yet, somehow, they never seem to be the one at fault. This is the final sign I want to talk about, the person who delights in destruction, not with fists or fury, but with precision. With whispers, with manipulation, with the quiet confidence of someone who knows exactly how to break things without ever getting their hands dirty. These are the people who love to pit others against each other, who start fires behind closed doors and then stand in the middle of the smoke, pretending to be the one trying to put them out. They create confusion so skillfully that you start to wonder if you're imagining it. And that's the point. The more off balance you feel, the more control they gain. They'll tell you one version of the truth and someone else another. They'll twist your words when you're not around. They'll leak private things you shared in confidence and then act surprised when it all blows up. And if you confront them, they'll look you dead in the eyes and say, "I would never do that. You must be confused. It's calculated, it's cruel, and it works because it wears you down." When you're constantly defending your version of events, when you're the one trying to restore peace, trying to untangle all the knots they've tied, you don't have the time or energy to realize who's actually pulling the strings. They love the fallout, though, not because they enjoy watching people in pain necessarily, but because it gives them something else: power, attention, control. Chaos is their playground, and the confusion of others is their shield. As long as the focus is on the mess, it's never on them. And the worst part is, they often disguise this behavior under the mask of concern or innocence. "I was just trying to help. I thought they should know. I didn't want to be in the middle of this." And yet, they always are. They always are. There's something almost addictive about that kind of person when you're caught in their orbit, because they don't start out showing you this side. They start out charming, curious, sometimes even magnetic. They know how to make you feel special, like you're the one they trust, the one they confide in, the one they need. And once you're hooked, once you feel that pull of closeness, that's when the games begin. And it messes with you, because when things inevitably go wrong, they'll turn it back on you. "Why are you overreacting? You're being paranoid. I was just being honest." And you're left sitting there wondering if maybe they're right. Maybe you are overreacting. Maybe this isn't a big deal. But here's the thing. When someone consistently leaves destruction in their wake and then denies responsibility, that's not an accident. That's not miscommunication. That's a pattern, a design, a choice. They don't want clarity. They don't want resolution. They want disruption. Because disruption keeps them at the center of things. It keeps people unsure, unsteady, dependent. And it keeps the truth buried under layers of doubt and noise. And I want to say this. If you've ever been caught in one of those storms, it doesn't mean you were weak or foolish. It means you were targeted. It means someone recognized your openness, your loyalty, your desire for connection, and decided to use those things against you. That's not your shame to carry, that's theirs. But once you see it, once you start to recognize the patterns, you have a choice. You don't have to stay in the game. You don't have to keep trying to fix what was never yours to fix. You can stop chasing peace in a place where peace is never going to be allowed. Because that's what people like this do. They make you think if you just say the right thing, do the right thing, work hard enough, you can restore the harmony, but there was never meant to be harmony. That was never their goal. Your job is not to be the emotional janitor for someone who keeps breaking things on purpose. You get to step back. You get to let the pieces fall without rushing to pick them up. You get to protect your space, because not everyone who causes damage does it with obvious violence. Some do it with a smile, with a secret, with a soft voice that sows seeds of distrust just deep enough to grow roots while they walk away clean. But don't confuse subtlety with innocence, and don't confuse proximity with safety. Just because someone is close to you doesn't mean they have your best interest at heart, and just because they're not yelling doesn't mean they're not causing harm. When someone thrives in the mess but refuses to own the mess they create, you're not in a relationship, you're in a battleground disguised as connection. And when peace feels impossible around them, it's because they were never interested in peace to begin with.